The acrid smell of burning wood filled my lungs, a suffocating blanket that pressed down on the already heavy air. The flames, a ravenous orange beast, were already devouring the roof of the distant house, spitting embers into the darkening sky. I was John Ryder, a man who'd seen too many fires, too much destruction, but something about this one felt different, colder. As I spurred my horse Old Bess closer through the swirling smoke, my eyes accustomed to scanning the vast, unforgiving frontier caught a flicker of movement in the dirt. At first my mind, quick to categorize, dismissed it as an animal, a terrified creature scrambling away from the inferno. But as Bess's hooves pounded closer, the image sharpened, and my blood turned to ice. It wasn't an animal. It was a girl. No older than 15, perhaps, dragging herself across the parched earth. Her dress, once probably a simple calico, was now a tattered ruin. And her face, oh God, her face was a mask of soot streaked with what I prayed was only dirt, not blood. I didn't hesitate. I vaulted off Bess, hitting the ground with a thud, and ran. The heat from the fire hit me like a physical blow, a roaring furnace that threatened to consume me whole. But I kept moving, driven by an instinct far older than any lawman's badge. The girl was racked with violent coughs, each one tearing at her frail frame. Her small hands, blackened and desperate, clawed at the earth, desperate to put more distance between herself and the consuming flames. When her eyes, wide and haunted, finally found me approaching through the haze, pure, unadulterated terror exploded in them. "Stay away from me," she shrieked, her voice raw, broken like shattered glass. "Please just leave me alone." My heart ached. I knelt down carefully, keeping a respectful distance, my voice a low, steady rumble. "Easy there, miss. I'm here to help. You're safe now." Her entire body was a trembling leaf in a storm. A thin trickle of blood snaked down from a cut on her forehead, stark against the soot. Her left arm hung at an unnatural, sickening angle. But it wasn't me she feared most. Her gaze kept darting back to the burning house, a horrifying magnet, as if expecting some monstrous entity to emerge from the inferno. "We need to get you away from here," I urged, gently extending my hand palm open, a gesture of peace. "That fire's spreading fast." "No." She scrambled backward, a fresh wave of panic washing over her, making her movements jerky, desperate. "You don't understand. He's going to come back. He always comes back." My stomach twisted into a knot. Something was profoundly, terribly wrong here. This wasn't just a house fire, a tragic accident. The way she spoke, the sheer visceral terror in her voice, it was the kind of fear that sprang from something far, far worse than flames. "Who's going to come back, miss?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, trying not to spook her further. Her lips trembled, the words barely a breath. "My father. He did this." He poured the kerosene himself and lit the match while I was sleeping inside. The confession hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath. I'd seen plenty of cruelty in my 45 years riding this harsh frontier. I'd witnessed men do unspeakable things for greed, for revenge, for power. But this man trying to murder his own child, it was a depravity that chilled me to the bone. Why, I managed the word thick in my throat. Why would he do such a thing, tears hot and stinging mixed with the soot on her face, carving clean paths down her cheeks? Because I'm a disgrace to the family name. Because I wouldn't marry the man he chose. Because I'm worthless. Each word was a fresh wound spoken with a chilling, practiced despair. Rage, pure and incandescent, began to build in my chest, a fire of its own. But I forced it down, forced myself to remain calm. This broken girl didn't need my anger. She needed my help, my protection. Slowly, deliberately, I removed my worn leather jacket, holding it out to her. "None of that's true, miss," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. "And whatever happened, you're not alone anymore." She hesitated for a long moment, her eyes still filled with a deep, ancient fear searching mine. Then, with a tentative movement, she reached for the jacket with her good arm. As she wrapped the rough fabric around her small, shaking frame, she looked up at me, her gaze still haunted. "He said he'd finish what he started if the fire didn't kill me." "Mr. Morrison Ryder," one corrected, gently offering my full name. "John Ryder." "And what's your name, Miss Alara?" she whispered. "Alara Vance." She glanced nervously at the horizon, her eyes wide with a fresh surge of panic. "Mr. Ryder, you need to leave." When he realizes I'm still alive. But I was already scanning the area, my hand instinctively drifting to the worn grip of my revolver, because in the distance, barely audible over the crackling roar of the flames, I could hear it. The unmistakable sound of approaching horses. My eyes narrowed, studying the horizon. The sound of hooves was growing steadily louder, a rhythmic thud against the earth, but it was still too far to discern the riders. Alara's entire body went rigid beside me when she heard it too. "That's him," she whispered, her voice barely, a breath lost in the inferno's roar. "That's my father. He's coming back to make sure I'm dead." I helped Alara to her feet, supporting her weight as she favored her injured arm. Her face was ashen, her eyes fixed on the approaching menace. "How can you be so sure?" I asked, though a sickening dread was already coiling in my gut. "Because he told me he would." Her voice cracked with fresh tears. Before he lit the match, he looked me right in the eyes and said, "If you somehow survive, I'll put a bullet in your head myself." Said the family honor demanded it. The casual, chilling way she spoke about her father wanting to kill her made my jaw clench. I dealt with plenty of hard men in my time, men capable of great violence. But a father hunting his own daughter, that was a different breed of monster entirely. "This isn't the first time he's tried to hurt you, is it?" I asked, my voice low. Alara shook her head, pulling my jacket tighter around her shoulders as if the fabric could somehow shield her from the memories. "Last month he pushed me down the stairs. Told everyone in town I fell. The month before that he locked me in the cellar for 3 days without food because I spoke to a boy at church. I felt sick to my stomach. Where's your mother in all this? Dead. Died when I was 10. Her voice became hollow, devoid of emotion. Sometimes I think she was the lucky one. The sound of hoofbeats was definitely closer now. I could make out at least 2 horses, maybe 3. I looked around quickly, assessing our grim options. The house was a raging inferno, completely engulfed, and we were out in the open, exposed with nowhere to hide. "Ilara, I need you to listen to me carefully," I said, my voice urgent, cutting through the rising panic. "Can you ride?" She nodded, though her face was pale with pain. "With this arm, I don't know how well, but I can try." "Good. I'm going to put you on Old Bess, and you're going to ride toward town as fast as you can. Tell Sheriff Thorne what happened here." "What about you?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear for me. I checked my revolver, making sure all 6 chambers were loaded, the familiar weight of cold comfort in my hand. "I'm going to have a conversation with your father." No, Alara grabbed my arm with her good hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You don't understand what kind of man he is. He's not just cruel. He's completely insane. Last year he beat a ranch hand nearly to death because the man looked at me wrong. He'll kill you without thinking twice about it." Maybe I conceded, my gaze fixed on the approaching riders, but I can't just let him ride up here and finish what he started. Alara's eyes filled with desperate tears. "Please, Mr. Ryder, just take me away from here. We can both ride out together. You don't owe me anything." I looked down at this broken girl who, despite her own unimaginable suffering, was begging me to save myself instead of protecting her. It reminded me of someone else long ago, someone I'd failed to protect when it mattered most. A ghost that still haunted my waking hours. "I'm not running, Alara," I said, my voice firm, resolute. "And neither are you. Not anymore." The hoofbeats were close enough now that we could hear voices carrying on the wind. Angry voices. Male voices. Voices planning violence. "Besides," I said, helping Alara toward Old Bess, my hand on her back, guiding her, "a man who'd burn his own daughter alive isn't the kind of man who stops hunting just because his prey got away once." Alara's face went stark white as she realized the chilling truth in my words. "He'll never stop, will he? Even if I run to the ends of the earth, he'll keep coming. Not if I have anything to say about it." I vowed, my hand instinctively tightening on my gun. But as I lifted Alara onto Old Bess, we both heard something that made our blood freeze. It wasn't just her father's voice echoing across the prairie. There were at least 3 men with him, and they were close enough now that their words were becoming chillingly clear. "Spread out and search everywhere. If that little witch is still breathing, I want her found." The voice that carried across the prairie made Alara's entire body start trembling again, a violent shiver that ran through her small frame. I'd heard plenty of dangerous men in my time, men whose voices carried the weight of violence. But there was something different about this one, something cold and calculated, a chilling absence of emotion that went beyond normal anger. "That's him, Alara," whispered, her knuckles white as she gripped the saddle horn. "That's my father." I positioned myself between Alara and the approaching riders, my hand resting on my gun ready. Through the smoke and the shimmering heat waves rising from the burning house, I could make out 4 distinct silhouettes on horseback, moving methodically across the landscape. They were like hunters tracking wounded prey, their movements precise and predatory. "Ilara, I need to know something," I said, my voice urgent. "Has he done this before? Tried to kill you like this?" She nodded, tears streaming down her soot-stained face, carving clean paths through the grime. "Not fire, but other ways. 2 years ago, he pushed me off the barn roof and told everyone I fell while cleaning gutters. Last winter, he locked me outside during a blizzard for an entire night. Said if I froze to death, it would teach me a lesson about obedience." My stomach churned, a bitter bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just an angry father having a bad moment. This was systematic, calculated abuse that had been building for years, a slow, deliberate torture. Why tonight? What changed? I pressed, needing to understand the catalyst for this ultimate act of cruelty. I told him I wouldn't marry Edgar Thorne, Alara's voice dropped to barely a whisper filled with a fresh wave of despair. Edgar's 63 years old and already buried 2 wives, but his ranch borders ours, and father wants the land. When I refused, he said I was defying God's will and the family honor. So he decided to kill you. He said a dead daughter was better than a disobedient one. She finished, her voice flat, devoid of hope. That at least a dead daughter couldn't bring more shame to the Vance name. The riders were close enough now that I could see them clearly. The man in front, Alara's father, Commander Theron Vance, was tall and lean with a shock of gray hair and eyes that seemed to hold no warmth at all. Even from this distance, I could see the chilling family resemblance between him and Alara. The other 3 men looked like hired guns, the kind of rough characters who'd do anything for the right price. Their faces hard, their eyes cold. "Mr. Ryder," Alara said urgently, her voice trembling, "those men with him aren't from around here. Father's been hiring drifters and outlaws for months now. Says he needs extra protection for the ranch, but I think he's been planning this for a long time." I studied the approaching group more carefully. The 3 men flanking Commander Vance all wore their guns low and ready, their hands hovering near the grips. These weren't ranch hands or neighbors helping with a family emergency. These were killers. "How many people know what really happened here tonight?" I asked, my voice grim. "Nobody. Father sent all our regular ranch hands away yesterday, said he was giving them time off. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, and with this wind, they probably think the smoke is just from a controlled burn." I realized with growing dread that this whole thing had been planned out perfectly. No witnesses, no help coming, and hired guns to make sure the job got finished properly. "Alara, there's something else you need to tell me." I pressed, a cold premonition settling in my gut. "What's your father's name?" "Theron Vance," she replied, "but most people call him Commander Vance. He was in the war." My blood went cold. I'd heard that name before, whispered in saloons around campfires, a name synonymous with ruthless efficiency and a chilling disregard for human life. Commander Theron Vance wasn't just any rancher. He was known throughout the territory as a man who solved his problems with violence and never left loose ends. And right now, Alara was the biggest loose end of his life. Commander Theron Vance reined in his horse about 50 yards away, close enough for me to see the cold, calculating glint in his eyes. The 3 hired guns spread out in a semicircle, effectively cutting off any escape routes. This was a man who approached killing his own daughter like a military operation. Alara Vance, his voice boomed across the space between us, raw with fury yet controlled. "I see you found yourself a champion. How touching." I stepped forward, keeping Alara safely behind me, my stance defiant. "Commander Vance, I presume. Seems like you've got some explaining to do about this fire." Vance laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that scraped against my nerves. "Oh, explaining to you? I don't believe we've been introduced, stranger. But then again, introductions won't be necessary since you'll be dead in a few minutes." "The name's John Ryder," I retorted, my voice steady, "and I'm not going anywhere until I know this girl is safe." "Safe?" Vance's eyes narrowed, glittering with contempt. "That girl is my property, Ryder. My blood, my responsibility, and my burden to deal with. You have no business interfering in family matters." Alara's voice came out as a broken whisper from behind me, filled with a raw, agonizing pain. "Property? Is that all I've ever been to you? You've been nothing but trouble since the day you were born." Vance spat, his voice laced with venom. "Your mother died bringing you into this world, and you've been a curse on this family ever since tonight. I finally do what I should have done 15 years ago. I'd seen plenty of evil in my time, but the casual, almost bored way this man talked about murdering his own child made my trigger finger itch, a burning sensation in my hand. "You're talking about killing a 15-year-old girl because she won't marry some old man?" I challenged, my voice laced with disbelief and disgust. "I'm talking about preserving family honor," Vance replied, his face a mask of cold conviction. "Something a drifter like you wouldn't understand. The Vance name means something in this territory. I won't have it dragged through the mud by a disobedient daughter who thinks she can make her own choices." One of the hired guns, a scarred man with dead, vacant eyes, leaned forward in his saddle. This was Silas, the Serpent Blackwood, a name whispered in hushed tones across the territories. "Commander, we doing this or not? Sun's getting low, and I want to be paid and gone before anyone comes looking." Vance raised a hand, a gesture of cold authority. "Patience, Silas. I want to make something clear to Mr. Ryder here before we proceed. Alara, tell him what happened to the last man who tried to help you." Ilara's voice was barely audible, a desperate plea. "Father, please don't tell him about Deputy Finch." My heart sank. "What about Deputy Finch? He came to the ranch last month when I showed up to church with a black eye. Asked too many questions about how I got hurt." Ilara's voice broke, completely dissolving into a choked sob. "They found him in the river 3 days later. Father said he must have fallen off his horse while drinking, but you know better, Vance." Finished, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Just like Mr. Ryder here is about to learn that some lessons only get taught once. My mind raced a whirlwind of grim realizations. This wasn't just about Alara anymore. Vance had already killed at least one man to keep his secrets, and he was clearly prepared to kill again. The 3 hired guns were professionals, probably faster with their guns than I was. Running meant leaving Alara to die. Standing meant fighting impossible odds. Here's what's going to happen, Ryder Vance, continued his voice chillingly calm. You're going to walk away right now. Get on your horse and forget you ever saw any of this. In exchange, I'll make your death quick instead of slow. And if I refuse, I ask, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. Vance's smile was colder than a winter wind. Then I'll let Silas and his friends have some fun with you before they put you down. But either way, you're not leaving here alive. You've seen too much and you know too much. I realized with crystal clarity that this had been Vance's plan all along. Kill Alara, kill any witnesses, and make it all disappear. The man wasn't just insane. He was methodical about his insanity. But as I prepared to make my move, Vance said something that stopped my blood cold. Oh, and Ryder. He added, a glint of malicious amusement in his eyes. Alara failed to mention that Silas here is the fastest gun in 3 territories. He's killed 17 men in fair fights and twice that many in unfair ones. Silas's hand drifted toward his holster, a casual, almost imperceptible movement, and his dead eyes fixed on me with the patience of a predator. I stared at Silas's hand hovering over his gun and felt time slow down to a crawl. 17 men in fair fights. The odds weren't just bad. They were impossible. A cold dread settled over me, a familiar companion in moments of extreme danger. But as I looked at Alara's terrified face behind me, her eyes pleading, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't fighting for myself anymore. You know what, Commander, I said, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, a calm that surprised even myself. I've got a counter-proposal. Vance raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something akin to curiosity in his cold eyes. I'm listening. Let the girl go, I proposed, my gaze locked on his. Let her ride away and I'll stay here and face Silas in a fair fight. Winner takes all. Alara grabbed my arm, her grip desperate. No, you can't do this. You don't understand what kind of man Silas is. But I was studying Silas's eyes, looking for any weakness, any crack in his formidable facade. The gunfighter was good. That was obvious from his relaxed stance, and the way he wore his gun almost a part of him. But there was something else there too. Arrogance. Silas was so confident in his abilities that he wasn't taking me seriously. A fatal flaw if I could exploit it. Vance laughed, a derisive snort. That's almost noble, Ryder, but you're missing the point. This isn't about fairness or honor. This is about eliminating problems. Alara dies tonight regardless of what happens to you. Then why not make it interesting? I pressed, pushing my luck. If I win, Alara goes free. If Silas wins, you get what you want anyway. What do you have to lose? Nothing, Vance admitted, a smirk playing on his lips, because Silas doesn't lose. I could feel Alara trembling behind me, a tremor that ran through her entire body. But I also sensed something else, a subtle pressure on my arm. A short squeeze, then a long squeeze, then another short squeeze. She was trying to tell me something without speaking, a desperate, silent warning. But I couldn't figure out what. All right, Ryder, Vance said, a cruel amusement in his voice. I'll indulge this foolishness. Silas, show this cowboy why they call you the fastest gun in 3 territories. Silas dismounted slowly, his movements fluid and practiced like a coiled snake. As he walked forward, I noticed something that made my stomach sink even further. The man wasn't just fast. He was ambidextrous. He wore guns on both hips and both hands, moved with equal precision, a terrifying symmetry of death. You ever killed a man before, cowboy? Silas asked, his voice like gravel, rough and cold. A few, I replied, my voice calm, belying the storm inside. Well, you're about to join them. I positioned myself for the draw, my mind racing through every gunfight technique I'd learned in 25 years of frontier living. Every trick, every feint, every split-second decision. But as I prepared to make my move, Alara suddenly stepped out from behind me, her small frame surprisingly resolute. Wait, she called out, her voice, though still raw, carried a new defiant strength. Before you kill each other, there's something you all need to know. Vance's face darkened, a furious scowl twisting his features. Alara, get back behind Ryder right now. No, father, she cried, her voice rising, filled with a newfound courage. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of running. And I'm tired of watching good people die because of your madness. She turned to face Silas directly, her gaze unwavering, gaining strength despite her injuries. Mr. Blackwood, my father hasn't told you the whole truth about why you're here. Silas's hand, poised over his gun, paused completely. A flicker of surprise, then suspicion crossed his dead eyes. What are you talking about, girl? Tell him about the gold, Father. Alara challenged, her voice ringing with accusation. Tell him about the real reason you want me dead. Vance's face went white with rage, a furious mask, but something else flickered in his eyes, something I recognized instantly: fear. Raw, primal fear. Ilara, you don't know what you've just done. I know exactly what I'm doing, she retorted, her voice firm, unwavering. For the first time in my life, I'm telling the truth. And with that, she revealed the secret that would change everything. Before my mother died, Ilara continued, her voice growing stronger, more confident with each word she told me, where she hid the gold from father's war crimes. $20,000 worth of gold coins stolen from Union supply wagons during the war. Silas's gun hand froze completely. $20,000. It was more money than most men saw in a lifetime, a fortune that could buy a man a new life, far from the dust and blood of the frontier. Vance's face went from white to purple with rage. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. Ilara, you little fool. You have no idea what you've just done. But Ilara wasn't finished. She hid it because she knew what kind of man father really was. A murderer and a thief who used the war as an excuse to get rich. The gold is buried under the old oak tree behind our house. The one that burned down tonight. I saw the exact moment when greed overtook loyalty in Silas's eyes. The gunfighter's gaze shifted from me to Vance, and his whole stance changed, a subtle but unmistakable shift. 20,000, you say? Silas asked slowly, his voice low, a dangerous purr. And where exactly did you say this gold was buried? Silas Vance warned, his voice deadly quiet, a tremor of desperation in it. Remember who's paying you. You're paying me $50 to kill a girl and a cowboy. Silas replied, his voice dripping with contempt. But she's talking about 20,000 in gold. My arithmetic says that's a much better deal. The other two hired guns exchanged glances, their eyes wide, with the same dawning realization, clearly thinking the same thing. I realized that Ilara had just turned Vance's own men against him with one devastating revelation. But the situation was still far from safe. If anything, it was more volatile. The problem is, Ilara continued, her voice holding a hint of triumph. Father's the only one who knows the exact spot. Mother gave me the general location, but she died before she could tell me the precise place. So you need him alive if you want that gold. Vance's hand moved toward his gun, a desperate, almost involuntary movement. You think you're clever, girl. All you've done is sign your death warrant, and Ryder's too. Because now I have to kill all of you to keep that gold secret. But Silas was already moving, drawing his gun with lightning speed. Not on me, but on Vance. I don't think so, Commander. See, I've got a new plan. We keep you alive long enough to dig up that gold, then we split it 4 ways. 4 ways, one of the other gunmen asked, his voice eager. Me, you two, and the girl, Silas clarified, a cold smile on his lips. The cowboy and the commander don't make it out of this. I felt the situation spiraling completely out of control. Silas had turned on Vance, but that didn't make him an ally. If anything, it made him more dangerous, because now he had real motivation to keep fighting. There's just one problem with your plan, Silas, I said quietly, my voice cutting through the tension. Yeah, what's that, Silas? Sneered, his eyes fixed on me. You're still planning to kill an innocent girl, and I can't let that happen. Silas's laugh was cold as winter wind, devoid of mirth. You're going to stop me, cowboy. Even with the commander's gun pointed at your back, I realized with horror that Vance had used the distraction to draw his own weapon and was now aiming it directly at my spine. I was caught between 2 guns, outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. There was no way out. Here's what's going to happen, Silas, announced, his voice filled with a chilling triumph. Ryder, you're going to drop your gun right now, or the commander puts a bullet in your back. Then we're all going to take a little ride to dig up some gold. My mind raced through my options, but they all led to the same grim conclusion. I was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. My hands started to move slowly, reluctantly toward my gun, preparing to drop it. But then Ilara made a move that nobody expected. She grabbed the reins of old Bess, and with a surge of desperate strength vaulted into the saddle despite her injured arm. If you want that gold, she shouted, her voice ringing out defiant against the crackling flames, you'll have to catch me first. And with that, she spurred old Bess into a full gallop directly toward the burning house. Ilara's desperate gamble worked exactly as she'd planned. The moment she spurred old Bess toward the flames, every gun, every eye turned away from me and toward her. Silas Vance and the other 2 gunmen all scrambled to mount their horses and give chase, shouting about the gold location dying with her. But I had been ready for this moment. The second their attention shifted, I drew my gun and put a bullet through Silas Blackwood's shoulder, spinning the legendary gunfighter off his horse and into the dirt. The man might have been fast, but he'd made the mistake of underestimating a cornered cowboy with nothing left to lose. Vance wheeled his horse around, his face twisted with pure, unadulterated rage. You fool. She'll die in those flames, and the gold location dies with her. Maybe, I replied, my gun still trained on the commander, my voice steady. but at least she'll die free instead of murdered by her own father. The other two hired guns hesitated, caught between their fear of Vance and their overwhelming greed for the gold. That hesitation cost them everything. I put bullets in both their shoulders before they could decide which side to choose, sending them tumbling from their saddles, screaming in pain. But Alara hadn't ridden into the flames to die. She'd ridden around the back of the burning house where the fire hadn't spread as heavily. And now she emerged from the smoke on the far side, still in the saddle but barely conscious from the heat and smoke inhalation. Vance saw her first and spurred his horse toward her. His gun raised, his eyes burning with a desperate, murderous intent. If I can't have that gold, nobody can. Starting with you, I had one shot left in my revolver. Vance was too far away for a sure kill, the distance daunting. But sometimes in life you have to take the shot anyway, and trust that justice, however elusive, will guide your hand. The bullet caught Commander Theron Vance's center mass, knocking him backward off his horse. He hit the ground hard, a sickening thud, and didn't get up. The man who terrorized his own daughter for 15 years was finally finished. I rode quickly to Alara, who was slumping forward in the saddle, her small body swaying precariously. Her face was pale from smoke inhalation, but she was alive. More importantly, she was free. "The gold," she whispered, her voice raspy, as I helped her down from Old Bess. "It's real. Mother really did hide it." "What do you want to do about it?" I asked, looking at the burning house, then at her father's motionless body in the dirt. Alara looked back at the inferno, then at the man who had been her tormentor. "I want to give it to the church in town. Mother always said stolen money brought nothing but suffering. Maybe it can do some good for once." I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. After everything she'd been through, after enduring such unimaginable cruelty, Alara's first thought was about helping others. That told me everything I needed to know about what kind of person she really was. As we rode toward town together, the smoke from the burning ranch, a distant smudge against the horizon, Alara asked quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Mr. Ryder, what happens to me now? I don't have any family left and I don't have anywhere to go." I had been thinking about that same question. My ranch was small, a modest spread, but it was honest work and a peaceful life. And maybe after years of living alone, it was time to have some family around again. "Well, Alara," I said, my gaze fixed on the setting sun, a new day, dawning in the west. "I've got a ranch that could use some help, and I could certainly use some company. If you're interested in hard work and a fresh start, you're welcome to stay as long as you want." For the first time since I'd found her crawling from the flames, Alara smiled. It was a small smile, fragile and uncertain, but it was real. And sometimes that's how healing begins, with one person willing to offer safety to another and the courage to accept it. The Vance Ranch burned to the ground that night, taking with it 15 years of fear and suffering. But from those ashes, two people found something worth saving: each other. ChatGPT Denoy. This is absolutely cinematic, an incredibly gripping and intense Wild West story with layers of redemption, cruelty, and defiance. You've already built an emotionally powerful narrative, but it could be sharpened even further for maximum punch, especially if you want it to flow like a final draft for a novel or screenplay. Here's how I'd refine it while keeping the raw emotion and vivid imagery intact, tightening the pacing and heightening the tension where it counts. Underscore. The acrid stench of burning wood filled my lungs, a suffocating shroud that pressed down on the heavy evening air. The flames, ravenous orange beasts, devoured the roof of the distant house, spitting embers into the bruised sky. I was John Ryder, a man who'd seen too many fires and too much destruction, but something about this one felt different. Colder. I spurred Old Bess through the swirling smoke, scanning the scorched earth out of instinct. That's when I saw it movement in the dirt. At first, my weary mind dismissed it as an animal, a coyote maybe fleeing the inferno. But as we closed the distance, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't an animal. It was a girl. No older than 15, she crawled across the parched ground, her calico dress a tattered ruin. Her face was a mask of soot streaked with tears, and God help her blood. I vaulted off Bess the ground, jolting up to meet my boots as I ran toward her. The heat lashed at me like a living thing, but I kept moving. Her frail frame shuddered with violent coughs, her blackened hands clawing at the dirt in a desperate attempt to escape the flames. When her wide, haunted eyes locked on me through the haze, terror exploded in them. "Stay away from me," she shrieked, her voice raw and jagged. "Please just leave me alone." I stopped a few paces short, raising both hands in a slow, steady gesture of peace. "Easy there, miss," I said gently. "I'm here to help. You're safe now." But she didn't look convinced. Her trembling intensified, her gaze darting back to the house as if expecting some demon to emerge from the flames. "We've got to move," I urged. "That fire's spreading fast." "No," she cried, scrambling backward in panic. "You don't understand. He's coming back. He always comes back." Her words hit me like a gut punch. This wasn't just a fire, this was something far darker. "Who's coming back?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. She hesitated, then whispered, "My father." He poured the kerosene and lit the match while I was sleeping inside. For a moment the world went still. I'd seen evil before, but this was a new depth, a father trying to burn his own child alive. Why, I managed my throat tight. Because I refused to marry the man he chose. He said I was a disgrace. Her words were brittle, broken. I swallowed the rage rising in my chest and shrugged off my worn leather jacket. "None of that's true," I said, firmly holding it out to her. "You're not worthless, and you're not alone anymore." She hesitated, then took the jacket with her uninjured arm, wrapping it tightly around herself like armor. "My name's Ryder," I said softly. "John Ryder." "What's yours, Alara?" she murmured. "Alara Vance." The sound of hooves pounding against the earth made her flinch violently. "That's him," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's my father. He's coming back to make sure I'm dead." I scanned the horizon and saw them, 4 riders emerging from the smoke silhouettes framed by the dying light. "Alara," I said urgently, "can you ride with one arm? I'll try." "Good. I'm going to put you on Old Bess. You're riding for town. Find Sheriff Thorne. Tell him everything. What about you?" I checked my revolver, making sure all 6 chambers were loaded. "I'll stay here and have a word with your father." "No," she cried, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "You don't know him. He's a monster. He'll kill you." Maybe I said, meeting her terrified gaze. But I can't let him finish what he started. As I lifted her onto Old Bess, the riders closed in. Their leader, tall, lean, and radiating cold authority, reined in his horse 50 yards away. "Alara Vance," his voice boomed. "I see you found yourself a savior. How quaint." I stepped forward, shielding her with my body. "Commander Vance, I presume," I called. "Seems we've got a problem to settle." "Not a problem," he said coldly. "A family matter, and you're about to be its next casualty. In life, we all face moments when we must choose between safety and doing what's right." John Ryder's story reminds us that even in a harsh, unforgiving world, courage and compassion can light the darkest paths. As we grow older, we realize that the most important legacy we leave isn't wealth or status. It's the lives we touch, the people we protect, and the kindness we offer when no one is watching. Ryder stood between an innocent girl and a ruthless father, not because he had to, but because his conscience demanded it. In today's world, we may not face outlaws or raging fires, but we still encounter situations where others need our voice, our strength, or our willingness to stand firm. This story teaches us that it's never too late to be a protector, never too late to right a wrong, and never too late to heal old wounds by helping someone else heal theirs. As the years pass, we may slow down, but our moral compass should never falter. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply refusing to turn away when others do and offering hope to those who've known nothing but fear.